So the other day, basically, I bought Super Mario Maker, and when
Yeah.
I was there at the store, they had amiibos there. And
Oh no.
amiibo story aside, and what you think about that, they had Zero Suit Samus, and they had Ganon, or
Mm-hmm.
Ganondorf,
No, it
technically.
looks amazing.
Yeah, I haven't removed. I am an opener. I'll remove them from their packages. But basically, I shot a photo of the haul and posted it on Twitter. And one of my friends who hadn't seen Smash Samus before noticed the high heels on Samus, and he said, "What? They put hooker heels on Samus?" Like he immediately blew up the way a lot of the rest of the internet blew up, and so that got us kind of talking a little bit about Samus. And um, what I mean, I don't really feel that. I don't really feel as bad about the heels that she's wearing as other people. I'm
Yeah.
not reacting the way that she is based on how she looks, but I do think that she does represent females in games for many, many people and has for decades
Yeah.
now. So, I mean, you find it offensive that she has these heels.
I love a good pair of heels. Like, but this is the thing. It's not practical at all. If you're a intergalactic bounty hunter and you're running around and you're fighting bad guys, granted the latex suit isn't exactly practical either. But the thing that bugs me is that in the previous Smash game, she had heels as well, but they were a lot shorter. She had basically normal looking boots that she wore. And this is the thing. High heels are just really, really impractical. And to me, it kind of takes away from her as, it just basically her being like a the butt kicker that she is. It takes away from that when you put her in these like sexy little heels to have her go strut around in while she beats people with her fancy whip.
I mean, I could see. I guess I could see you making that argument for Smash because of the nature of what Smash is. Granted, Smash also has a very big fun factor in it.
It does.
I mean, there is a bit of, I would use the word zaniness to kind of describe it.
Yeah.
Now is are her high heels zany? I'm not saying that.
Her high heels are totally zany for that game.
Well, which would fit. I'm just saying, like, Metroid and what she does in Metroid is different than what she does in Smash. And even though you could say, but people are beating each other up in Smash, this is serious combat, yeah. But I'm just kind of like, they're a larger than life, like they're already larger than life characters, many of the Nintendo
Yeah.
characters, and this is kind of the big Nintendo roster, like walking out and going, yeah, for like Smash, and making everybody smile. And I think that the heels on Samus, I mean, to me, aren't a big deal, and I say that respecting Samus quite a bit, having played Metroid since there was only a single game called Metroid. But at the same time, she was able to do every single thing that she did in the game, in the original Metroid, and then at the end you find out, oh, by the way, it's a girl. Surprise.
Yeah.
But at the
And
same...
she was technically wearing less clothing.
And then if you beat it in a short amount of time, she was wearing a bikini. So right from the beginning, it kind of had a bit of this, like, strip Metroid vibe. But... but it didn't really come along until, I mean, the very end of the game. And even then, if you beat it in a certain amount of time, it was just kind of like a little, the briefest fan service in 8 and then 16-bit, graphics.
Yeah. Well, I think, sorry, I think the issue is that Samus had, or over the years, I guess, I feel like Samus has had a lot of character development. And I just feel like when you get to that point where her outfit's already very sexy. And I think for a lot of people, they feel like it takes away from her being this, straight up tough bounty hunter.
Should it? Should it take away from it?
I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with being feminine and tough at the same time, but I feel like to a certain extent, sometimes they're just trying to kind of like, it feels almost like a fetishization of Samus. You know, it's like, and I feel like it takes, feel like it takes away some of the credibility, if that makes sense, for her as a character, which I realize is kind of dumb, but that's what happens when you haven't made a decent Metroid in how many years?
Ouch. Well, so I mean, well, Metroid
haven't made a Metroid in how many years?
Well, Metroid did have a bit of a lull after you had Metroid 2, and then Super Metroid for Super Nintendo, and they didn't really have anything for N64 as far as a main what you would think of as a flagship Metroid game. So it wasn't really until Game Boy Advance, you know, and then of course the GameCube and Metroid Prime, and now suddenly we're in 3D as we turn into the new millennium. But if you look at the Game Boy Advance games, both Fusion and Zero Mission, when you beat those and you beat it in a certain amount of time, or you have a certain amount of item completion or etc., you get various shots of Samus in after work attire, and it might be a I just got out of the gym type attire, you know, and it would just it would show you that at the end of the game. And up until that point also, I mean, all of Metroid's development of the character of Samus was all silent. Everything that you've seen, I mean, obviously there are spoilers if you haven't played some of these games, but you know, when you find the baby Metroid in Metroid 2, which eventually turns into this huge Metroid and then dies, you inherit its power, and you know the connection between Samus and the baby and all that. All this is done with no dialogue. It's just through actions on the screen, with a fully suited up Samus. And that defines her character. The actions that you play as Samus define her character. The gamer is always a part of the storytelling if you've made a good game. And I think a lot of people vaulted Samus quickly up to this pedestal that says, like, number one, she is an incredibly powerful character capable of doing many things. And number two, yes, by the way, she is a she.
Yeah.
You know, and there was no dialogue to go with that. There were only actions, and everybody created Samus in their head over the period of a decade and a half.
Yeah.
They had a perception of what she was. And then all of a sudden we hit what I'll just call phase 2 of Metroid, which are the Game Boy Advance games, more graphical, like here's Samus out of her suit type shots. The Zero suit comes about. So now we have this blue spandex thing, pixelized, but here it is, and then that is then brought forward in Metroid Prime, and you see her in 3D out of her suit, and she is developing more. Oh, that's a terrible way to put it, but she's developing more as a female.
Yeah.
As we make these graphical jumps into 3D and rendering, and then of course Super Smash Brothers comes along, and you're seeing Zero Suit in more media. Magazine covers, more images of Samus as represented as a female, more as represented as a tough character.
Yeah.
And so if you zoom forward now to the high heels again, you know, yes, people are getting upset with it, but it's kind of more the same, and it's kind of showing her out of suit and not having to be in suit. I'm ready for your counter argument.
I guess. Well, you know, I guess when you put it that way, it makes more sense. And I guess it kind of comes down to the question of why can't a character be both? Like, why can't you have a female character that's, you know, badass bounty hunter by day, and then strong, independent woman who don't need no man at night, but still likes to go out and have a good time.
Right.
And I guess for a lot of people, they just feel like maybe they feel like the more liberties that are taken with making her a sexualized character, that they'll just continue to move in that direction. Which, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Bikini Samus is an alternate costume in the new Smash, isn't it?
Is it?
I want to say that it is, but at the same time, I guess you're right. Like, she's always been a character that's been sexualized, but I guess they kind of damped it down. And then you also have to consider, you know, they tried to give her a narrative in Other M, which
Oh, okay. Yeah, so you're bringing up Other M.
that game which must not be named.
the appropriately named Other M, that other Metroid game.
Burn.
Yeah. So Other M is
Well, I feel
I
like
can't
Mother.
think of a
I feel
cliche
like
for it right now, but it's basically like I felt like the structure of Metroid and who Samus is throughout all the games still works. I thought she could be a tough bounty hunter while also being a sexy female who can go out and have a good time and then go right back to business as usual and be perfectly capable. Was thrown out the window with Other M
okay.
because now she's represented as, I mean, they they upped her cup size, which, okay, if you want to do that, okay, she's not, but at the same time she has all these other games where they didn't really accentuate that pixels being pixels, but
Yeah.
like that was not a part of her, so you're kind of like, okay, but then in addition to that, she went from this capable female who could do her job to someone who is seeking approval in a
Yeah.
way and like wanting to, make a male character proud of her, and I enjoy the gameplay of Other M, but the story and all that, I thought that tore down Samus much more than say just wearing high heels in Smash does.
Yeah.
But I also recognize that Other M is much more of a niche entry into the Metroid franchise versus Smash, which is big time Nintendo front running game.
Yeah. Well, I guess, and this is kind of an offshoot, so I apologize. But when you were just saying just now how in Other M, they almost kind of delegitimized her to you as a character that was independent.
Yeah,
Or
it did have some good points about writing her character, but
yeah.
I don't mean to trash it completely.
No.
There were some major points that I thought needed to be made.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, so what I was going to say is that when it comes to sexualization of a character in general, one of the things that I always think of, because you and I have actually had this discussion a couple of times about if a character can be, I guess you could call it, this is going to sound really weird, but like proud sexy. So character, in Samus's sexiness has always been kind of like a byproduct.
By the way, I'm sexy.
By the way, I'm sexy. And it's never really been something that's been commented on heavily or even really kind of put in the limelight. And I guess I feel like when they changed her to like these crazy, ridiculous heels that are super impractical, that it kind of brought that out. Like, look at me, I'm sexy, rather than, by the way, I'm sexy. And I think you can have characters like that. Immediately, the first two I think of are Bayonetta and Juliet Starling from Lollipop Chainsaw. Both of them are unashamedly sexy, flirtatious, ridiculous heels characters. Juliet actually doesn't wear heels. Anyways, they're unashamedly sexy characters, but all of that's presented without commentary. They just are. They make jokes or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's something that's kind of like called into question or that's not what I'm trying to say. But basically they just are. And Samus has always just kind of been, but I guess it feels to me like when they put her in heels, it was kind of like calling it out. Like, look at her. She is sexy. And it's like, dude, everybody already knew that. You don't have to put her in heels. Like, you can put her in normal shoes. And people are still going to think she's sexy.
It felt a lot different than it did at the end of a game, at the end of a Metroid game, when they would be like, oh, and here she is out on the town having some drinks at a bar or whatever. It's kind of like, now I'm fighting in Smash in my heels.
Yeah.
You felt that gave more of a, I'm a pinup. Oh, yeah? What do you like to do? Well, it's like I like to wear these heels and I like to dress like this and what do you do for a living? I'm a bounty hunter. Oh, that's nice. could you turn your head this way and smile, please?
Yeah.
You know, like that. It basically flip-flopped the whole
Stick your
thing.
butt out while I make this amiibo mold for you. Yeah.
Right. Hey. Well. Okay. So I bought that amiibo.
I'm sure you did.
I.
It was a good wave, tangent, but this wave was really good.
Amiibos. Pay no attention to the dialogue about amiibo. Yeah, that was not the main point that we wanted to focus on, but it was kind of what spurred this whole Samus talk that we've had a few times before.
Yeah.
But so the heels didn't really bother me, but I can understand how it would be like, all right, now wait a minute.
Yeah.
You know, for Smash, when here she is in Zero suit, and why don't we go ahead and put some heels on that to go with the Samus out in the bar scene. From the Game Boy Advance games. I mostly think of the Game Boy Advance game. And maybe I can splice some of these images in, so.
Well, I'll admit that I was not, I was totally ready to throw down with you and be like, no, look, she's just a tough bounty hunter. But then when you're pointing out the fact that in the games previously, she's, chilling at a bar in like clubwear or whatever, being her sexy tomboyish self. I imagine her as a tomboy. And I mean, that's a good point. And there's nothing wrong with a character being, natively sexy. I guess I just worry that they're pulling her towards that route instead of letting her speak for herself as she's already been designed.
But I would say this. I think she is one of the best characters to be both capable and sexy. But I think that she has a great deal of adversity to face due to how many other females have been represented in the video gaming world. Yeah. And so I think that a lot of that is preventing her from simply being herself. This is funny because she's like, all of them are fictional characters.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, if they were all real and this were all happening and all these games were real, I would see Samus as somebody who's just like, there are certain aspects of me that are sexy that I need to basically hide in order to be more of a role model of what other video gaming women should be.
Well, and then in addition to that, you compare her to like the rest of the Nintendo stable, and she's by far the most out there female character they have, because I mean everybody else is basically they're a Nintendo princess, not a Disney princess, but a Nintendo princess.
Right. So
you have everybody's wearing these cute little dresses all the time, and then there's Samus.
Right. I mean, my way of
Samus
looking
is
at
sexy, apparently.
If you look at the big three, Peach, Zelda, and Samus, it's from the very beginning. And they've evolved a little bit, but from the very beginning it was save me, anybody need any saving?
Like, time for a mashup, let's do it.
Right, that was the difference between the three of them,
Yeah.
So, but I heard a podcast at one point, and somebody was talking about Samus being on the front of a magazine, and I'll try to find the image, but basically she was out of suit and basically like, here I am, in a certain way. And I believe his phrase was, she doesn't need that. She doesn't need that kind of attention. But because that's not who she is. And that really got me because I'm like, that's always who she is. Like, she's always been personified as a sexy person just as much as she has been a bounty hunter. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with being both of those.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where it gets hard, especially because females in games in general have been so sexualized for such a long time that I guess Samus is kind of like that final hope for a lot of gamers. For a lot of female gamers or even gamers who just really want to see that. And in truth, we're seeing a lot more representation now of females in games who are not like that. But in terms of Samus is kind of like that great original hope, I guess.
Right.
And that's why people get so attached to the idea and almost want to like protect her character to a certain extent. But I would say that it, not to get like super feministy on you, but from a feminism standpoint, it actually I think it's kind of a good thing that she's both.
Yeah.
And I think that, I guess, yeah.
Well, I mean, in anything in life, oftentimes when you're trying to represent the other side of a stereotype or just an argument, you tend to completely swing the opposite direction that everything is going.
You polarize, yeah.
Right. You naturally want to polarize. So everything that you see and don't like, you want the opposite of it to be represented, And I think it's one of those things that basically is, we shouldn't have any sexy females or whatever. Put some armor on, not a boob plate. It's like,
yeah.
Basically make all your characters to where you're like, is that a guy or a girl in there? I don't know. You know, and I mean, I can see that, and like I use the term boob plate. I don't want to go down that path, but like basically like,
yeah.
Trying to make everything so generic though that it starts losing personality. Like,
yeah.
And so,
well, okay, I get what I know what you mean by that, but here's the thing that I'm just going to point out. When you go back to the very beginning with games, just in general, everything was that simple and that unidentifiable. And that was kind of like how you created those personalities. And like the writing and the personality was what came through.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I mean, even in the situation of Metroid, it's like you play through the whole game thinking it's a dude the whole time, and then you get to the end and you find out it's a woman, and it's like,
I think even the manual for Metroid said he, referred to Samus as a he.
Yeah.
So unless you got Nintendo Power or had word on the street or at school or something, you got to the end and you may have never found out, because if you didn't beat it in a certain amount of time, the suit doesn't come off.
Yeah.
But if it did, you were like, whoa. And of course now it's just, well, everybody knows that.
Yeah. But that alone is a huge narrative move. Without writing out a bunch of stuff, but it's kind of like a boom, here you go. Ta-da!
Right.
And I think that we taught you were just saying, that you kind of want to keep individuality in the characters. But sometimes I feel like character design is a little bit of an issue nowadays because of stuff like that, because you feel so forced to create things a certain way. Yeah. Right. And it gets gratuitous or far too gender neutral, and you lose the personality of the characters.
It turns out not being like, okay, let's make her decisively female. Somebody hits the bullet point on their list that says add pinup attributes now.
Yeah.
And that's the route they take, instead of being, okay, now we need somebody who looks a little bit more feminine.
Yeah.
To represent the fact that she is indeed a female.
Yeah.
So.
Man, just makes you think of when I played Animal Crossing and you have to do this whole stupid questionnaire in the beginning where it asks you a bunch of questions, and I ended up with a tomboy character, and I was so mad. I was like, I want a girly girl. But I am kind of a tomboy. Personal ambition. But you don't really get a lot of in-betweens in gaming. It's one or the other a lot of the time. And maybe that's why Samus is kind of polarizing for people, because she's kind of both.
Yeah. Well, oftentimes, games look to represent the extremes in many different areas.
Yeah.
So you look at the fighting, well, I don't want to get too much into the specifics, but you look into certain genres of games, I was going to say fighting games, and you see like a lot of what you would almost say is stereotypes represented in the fighting games. And I don't necessarily mean that as in like a racial profile or what country they're from or whatever, but like a body type.
Yeah.
Like, oh, and here's the smaller svelte. I'll just focus on the females. Here's the smaller svelte one, and here's the kind of like should be posing in certain types of magazines body type, and then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and that just gets repeated, and it happens in other genres of games as well. And It's not just because they figure like we need to differentiate between all these characters. We can't have them all be like well-rounded, because that's boring.
Yeah.
So they all have to be extremes, and then when they start picking extremes for the female, they're all like, all right, on average, hourglass, scantily clad, ready to be the poster one, the box cover, the case, like, be ready to represent, female anatomy on, the front cover of this, because you're going to be a marketing tool. As well as and so those extremes come out, and obviously we've seen people, and we'll probably do another show about, like, female representation there. But staying focused on Samus, I feel that Samus does manage to pull off this well-rounded woman who is capable and sexy, but whenever the sexy is accentuated for her, like in the case of these high heels, it
touches a nerve.
Yeah, it rockets her up into the stereotype tier and say, no, she's not there. She's on a level all of her own.
Yeah.
She shouldn't be here, and I'm kind of like, well, she should be allowed to be sexy because she backs up everything, in what she can do. We already know that she can do things.
Yeah.
I guess somebody could counter with the argument that, like, some of the pin-up looking characters can do a lot of stuff in some of these, like, 3D shooters or what have you, but I think the sexiness was an afterthought for Samus. Even though it was there from the beginning, it was kind of like oh, by the way, instead of like, okay, we need to have a female and she can kick butt and she can be, and, like, basically, like, here's Lara Croft. Like, the original design of Lara Croft.
Completely gratuitous, done on purpose, obviously intentional, and not really one of those things that... It wasn't one of those things where it was presented without commentary. That was the big deal with her.
Right.
Was that she was hot.
And we kind of drew a parallel to real life with Samus.
Yeah.
And I know that I tend to, like, I am this person that seems to take, like, sports and games and manage to have them live in harmony.
Sports. Yeah.
Because I do feel that, like, that's kind of like the like playground divide. Like, well, we're gonna go over here and do this. You guys go play your sports. We're gonna go play Dungeons and Dragons. That's the way it's gonna be for the rest of our lives.
Until we all get into fantasy football, and then it's going to change completely.
Right. But another show. But the reason I bring this up is because mixed martial arts, UFC, I don't really follow it actively, but I do follow a lot of sports things naturally on my social media, etc. And so whenever there's a big fight coming up, I see a promo for it, and there's a female fighter who is basically undefeated and pretty much owns any other woman when they fight. And her name is Ronda Rousey, I think, who can come in here and just dominate, truly capable of, like, defeating anyone. And then she can basically more or less get cleaned up. Mm-hmm. And then go play the sexy role to the point where she's even in, like, a Carl's Jr. commercial, where they're typically, like, having fun with innuendo and, like, putting stuff in your face. And she has a good attitude about it all. And I'm like, hey, this is Samus in real life. Like, I mean, like, I know she doesn't fly around in a spaceship and shoot aliens, but this is a real person who manages to pull off both sides.
Yeah.
So... But then again, once again, you have but Samus, the video gaming world, faces the adversity of all the way that women are represented in video games. And so...
Well, I mean, but women in sports have that exact same problem. I mean, I was just reading an article about Ronda the other day about how somebody made some comment about her arms and how she, like, looked too masculine and needed to, like, feminine it up, I guess. And I mean, it's almost kind of like the opposite of the Samus situation, where it's like, Samus is being too sexified. She needs to be, needs to tone it down. But the bottom line is that you're always going to have people who are trying to control or comment on how a character or a person should look to fit their own mental idea of like perfection, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, that's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I mean, it happens a lot, and I think that in the case of Samus, I don't think it's done out of like a, I think it's done more out of a protective stance than anything else. Like protecting their character and making sure she still has her integrity and doesn't like end up in a true, straight up bikini in future games, which I don't think Nintendo would ever do, but never say never. And I guess for some people they just feel like, the more little things you change, eventually it can turn into a whole change.
Yeah. I think, and more to your point about basically saying that, oh, Ronda should be more feminine and this, that, and the other. And it's like, oh, you need to try not to look too masculine. It's almost like when you do, reach that higher level, like Samus does in her medium, and as Ronda does in her sport, then suddenly all the eyes are upon you, and then now you have to personify perfection for a female in this role.
Yeah.
So, like, you have to, you can't, if Samus, okay, so you have these heels now, I mean, you need to be a bounty hunter, you need to make sure you're still strong, and just like you said, the opposite thing, it's like, okay, Ronda, we know you can kick anybody's butt on the planet, but you really need to, like, flaunt some more feminine side, maybe wear a dress in the ring, or, it's just like, you're just like, what? And they're just like you said, they're trying to, like, piece together what, the perfect
Their
stereotype,
ideals.
in their mind, and putting it out there. Although, fortunately, I think Ronda is somebody who can actually, she can pretty much, like, snap back and be like, so this is how it's going to be.
Yeah.
And it's not ideal. Whereas Samus is not a real person. She's fictional, and
she's created.
And a lot of, well, not only that, but this goes back to what I said about the gamer being a part of everything. She's created in people's minds, So, so anything like high heels, not to go back about my side of the argument from earlier on, but basically it's people feel like it's probably misrepresenting what she should be like to the gamers.
Yeah.
Who oftentimes are not really known for, well, anyway.
Yeah. It feels like she's being cheapened as a character when you slap a pair of high heels on a character that already has a lot of, I don't want to say influence, but like she has a lot of history.
History, yeah.
And it's like you know her character and you know like what she is, and it just seems kind of ludicrous to have her in ridiculous heels. But at the same time, I can see your point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, any other things to say about Samus?
I'm sure, but it will probably be another topic for another time.
Probably so. I'm sure we could talk even more about her, but I think we hit the main points that we wanted to hit about representation and the heels in her history and trying to be, well, being a bounty hunter and being sexy at the same time.
Yeah.
What a difficult role it is for her.
Man, being a chick is hard, let me tell you. Everyone's trying to tell you to do something.
Wow.
Or to be something.
All right, well, I guess that's a show.
Yep.
So we'll put this out there at some point. And yeah, see you next time.